Hi, I'm Sheryl Gottschall, and today I'm here with Suzy Hansen, who's the Director of UFocus NZ in New Zealand. She's also an experiencer, and she's just published a new book, fairly new, isn't it, called The Dual Soul Connection, the Alien Agenda for Human Advancement, which sounds amazing. It makes you wonder. When I first got this, I thought, oh my gosh, I wonder what is in here. What are we going to hear about? But you've had a long, I guess you could say, extended period in your life, almost all your life, where you've been involved in having close encounters that started in childhood. And I think you mentioned you'd have a lot of night visitations.
Yes, that's right. In early childhood, I had recollection of waking at night and seeing what I called creatures by my bed. They were very loving and made me feel good. It wasn't a threatening thing. I wasn't frightened by it. And the memories would be quite brief. I would see them there and then I wouldn't remember any more about it until the morning. I didn't, of course, as a child, think about it too deeply. I talked to my mother about it. And having had a religious background, she's proposed to me that it could be spirits of family members who'd long gone, or it could be an angelic kind of visitation. It wasn't until I was in my early adulthood that I really began to piece pieces together and realise that there was something else behind it all, and that the memories were real and were not dreams.
Oh, okay, right. So you had, I think you talk about in your book, you had recurring dreams in childhood of things like tragedy, and you were sort of put into situations of how to deal with these experiences, these events, while you were being observed. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
I seemed to find myself in a white room with a trio of entities. Sometimes they were very blurry and smudgy and indistinct, but I knew they were there and I could sense their feelings and their thoughts, and they would like drop an incident into my mind that would play out, and there would be expectation of how I might solve this or how I might react to it, what emotions I felt towards it, and I had the feeling that this was being monitored by them, and they would comment that at the end of it and thank me for my participation in it. And this was quite a reoccurring dreamlike memory throughout early childhood at least.
Okay. And I think you also mentioned that they wanted you, while you were doing this, they wanted you to do it to, exercise and learn to use the full powers of your own mind.
That's right.
Did you? And do you use that power today? Or?
Yes. Well, I believe I was being taught mind skills, if I can put it that way. Some people might call it psychic skills or metaphysical skills. But certainly I have had a lifetime where I have used those kinds of skills, precognition, telepathy, and a lot of things that many humans experience. But I feel probably I've experienced it more often than the average person in the street might do. Right.
And now this comes up, I'm glad you touched on that point, it comes up a lot with people who have close encounters who often report they have these, what we would call psychic abilities. And you mentioned that you also had like you would see dead people as well, and you also had a really close emotional and energetic connection to the animal and plant kingdom.
That's right, yes. I experienced right throughout childhood telepathy, what I believe was telepathy with animals. So sometimes I would pick up what I might call a thought form from an animal. Sometimes I was correct in that they were ill or they had something wrong with them that would be discovered later on. I could sense how they were feeling about certain situations or how they reacted to certain things, and that was right from a very young age. I can remember having that ability.
Now, you mentioned in your book that in 1990 you came across David Jacobs' book Secret Life, and it had an effect on you like it did on a lot of people. And it gave you cause to consider that perhaps your dreams that you'd been having as a child were more than just dreams, but actually part of an ongoing training program, if you like, for you. And at that stage, were you starting to twig then that there was something else going on?
Yes, because I'd had a sighting experience that was really a catalyst. It catapulted me into research, not only into UFO sightings, but also into investigating my own experiences thus far in my life up to early adulthood. And I was with a friend on a backcountry road in New Zealand. We were travelling on this back highway. We saw lights appear in the sky further on down the straight, over a line of hills next to us. They switched off, reappeared close to us, switched off. This carried on for a few seconds, and then they seemed to disappear. In the meantime, we'd slowed our car to a halt, basically looking for these lights and wondering what they were, arguing about what they might be. Was it a helicopter? Was it an aircraft landing lights? And then the light came up behind us. It was a huge white orb of light, wider than the road, and it engulfed our car. And that's the last I recall, is the absolute terror as this light engulfed our car. And we ended up with an hour and a half missing time. So that really was a tangible experience where there was something serious that I could not explain, that loss of time, and going from late afternoon sunlight to complete darkness in my next memory when I seemed to wake up in the car motors starting up, and we're at the end of the straight and it's dark. So that was a terrifying experience, but it really made me face up to what had been happening and looking back at my life with a different light.
That would have been terrifying. It would have been absolutely terrifying. I can understand. I can just imagine what you went through there. And a lot of people have reported very similar things to us as well.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about at age 20, you had a prophetic and life-changing dream where you were actually accompanied by someone in a garden, and they revealed to you the many difficult things that you'd experienced in your life. And you said in your book that most of that had come true. So I guess I wanted you to talk about the significance of that, why it was so significant for you, and how you think it related to your close encounter experiences. Like, why did that happen, do you think? Why did you...
Well, I'd had a very serious car accident and suffered, some spinal injuries. And I'd gone into a bit of a slump after that because my friend who was in the car with me was seriously injured. It was not my fault in terms of legalities, but it was a pretty profound experience. Made me question a lot of things because we could have died. And I had this prophetic dream where I was in this garden, as you said, talking to someone who seemed very wise and very ancient. And they lay my life out before me, what I was going to go through and the things I was going to have to face, the tasks I would do. But at the end of it, it was as if a dampener was put on all of that, and all I remembered was this structure where things were going to get very bad and I was going to go through a lot of things, and then towards the end of my life it would start to come up again and I'd have a lot of realizations. So I was left with just the structure and all the actual detail of every single event, which made me feel like, is this life really worth living? Just faded away and left me with the structure. So I was basically told, this is what's going to happen, but this is the hope, this is a positive outcome. And for the rest of my life, no matter what I went through, I had that positive outcome always in my mind that I really held on to. So I think it was like a tool that was given to me to assist me through that life.
So are you relating that, like the being that you were with and giving you that experience, to some of the beings that you were having in your close encounters?
I could not actually see the being. It was it was as if I was trying very hard to focus on them. There was a figure, and I remember it being pale, but I don't remember any of the actual distinct features. So I'm unable to say whether it was a spirit being, whether it was an extraterrestrial. I don't know. I only know the message and what I was given.
Very interesting. You also speak in your book. You talk about time slips, where you see people who have ceased in their motion. They seem to be frozen,
Yes.
And one event was when you first observed softball-sized lights in the room, and your elder son confirmed he saw them too, so you knew it was something was there. And then your surroundings took on a strange atmosphere with all the sound receding in the distance. And then you saw your partner and your son cease all movement, and they were like statues. And you also had an incident like that later on that year too when you were out at barbecue. I mean,
Yes.
what was that? How do you
Yes.
explain that?
Well, I'll start by talking about what I know about actual extraterrestrial craft, where you can see a craft that appears to be quite small, and you think, well, how's everyone going to fit into that? But when you actually enter it, it's as if it's quite a vast area. Now, scientists have looked at this concept, which keeps cropping up in experiencers' dialogues about how there seems to be a change in a shape or the vastness of a space. And I can liken that to what I experienced with what I call a time slip, whereby everything comes to what seems like a standstill, and I feel like we are somehow put into an altered state, and it's as if time slows down and stops. But then I feel as if our consciousness is actually transported somewhere else, where we do something that becomes a vaster period of time. So what seems like seconds of where everything comes to a standstill, and you see people as if they've turned to stone around you, something is happening to you during that time span. And it may be a very brief time span, but when your consciousness is transported elsewhere, it can be quite a long period of time, where an event takes place of a discussion or some other kind of onboard craft experience or whatever, or a spirit experience. So I have encountered that on a number of occasions, and I know other experiencers speak of the same kind of thing. Sometimes people are held in like suspended animation while that experiencer is then taken somewhere and brought back.
You touched on the point of these small spaces, but being, inside they seem to have a different physics, basically.
Yes.
And I remember that Betty Andreasen had that experience in her books, the series, The Andreasen Affair, and she was quite shocked. But her mind sort of didn't get around that. Did you have any of those sorts of experiences?
Well, having had experiences right throughout my life, I'm probably less shocked than just having a sudden group of experiences or whatever. But I do recall one incident where a small group of humans, including myself, were taken into a room on a craft that seemed quite small, and then we were told we were going to experience factors of the grey culture. And the first thing they did was tell us we can expand a space. And we actually watched the white walls physically moving away from us. They seemed to move away until it became a vast area where the walls were no longer visible. It was just a vast space in which this experience took place with light and disintegration of figures into light and into colour. So it does happen quite frequently in experiencers' dialogues. Now,
you also mentioned you had this experience where you're looking up at the sky and you have this sense of homesickness. That comes up a lot for people, and it's like a natural connection to planet Earth, and our physical family just seems to disintegrate, and people relate more easily to extraterrestrials. Now, do you think that is our natural response, or do you think that's induced by extraterrestrials somehow?
I think it's possibly both. I think we do have that natural response to the natural world and things that are unknown to us that we sense. But also, as part of what I write about in my book, The Dual Soul Connection, the dual soul status, is that I was feeling a sense of longing for entities that I am a part of and they are a part of me. So that was that link and that feeling of kinship that I was feeling, and the fact that I had a sense of missing them and a sense of not quite belonging where I was at the time, and feeling that I would actually prefer to be there.
So let's pick up on that point about dual souls. What is it? How does it happen? And how does it work?
Okay, from my understanding, and it is only my understanding, other people may have their own take on it. My understanding is that before incarnating in this life, my soul spark was drawn towards leading this life, leading and choosing and selecting a particular life to lead. And as a prerequisite to that, I was taken to a vast space where I met with what I can call a council, or a group of beings that represented other entities in our galaxy, as well as a human perspective from our planet. And basically they examined whether they felt I had the ability to lead and do this life, and to take part in the task that they were wishing me to do. So there had to be a point of agreement between myself, them, and other souls who would work with me in this life, and I would work with them. So it was a mutual discussion and a mutual agreement. Although that word agreement is often used quite tritely in the UFO field, but that was my experience on that occasion, that there had to be agreement. And from there I was actually taken or directed to, found myself in a ball of light state on a grey craft with another ball of light that I was going to work closely with in this life. And then we were told that we would receive a background education, background on the planet, background on what we were about to do, what it was desirable we could achieve. But also we were told that the soul state, that electric ball of light, was going to be enhanced. And that enhancement was the inclusion of what I call the dual soul state, which is my soul status, everything that I have learnt in previous lives that I was bringing to this life, but also the grey intelligence, the grey consciousness, so that I could tap into that if need be, and feel like I'm a part of that, and be able to understand it. So that when I then incarnated in this life and eventually began having all of these experiences, it was probably easier for me to adapt to it than a lot of people have found to assimilate these experiences into their lives, because I felt I had this other understanding that I could apply at times, and it took me a long time to understand what that was and what it meant, and how I could do that consciously. So that's the best way that I can describe the dual soul status.
Right, sounds very complex.
It is.
We'll get more into that more. Okay. Now, I know that people who have close encounters often, and you've said it yourself, you struggle for a long time with the fear, the apprehension, the anxiety of not knowing what's going on, all that sort of thing. But you mentioned in your book that you reached a point where that fear started to change to, what did you say? You said feelings of love? Yeah, how did that happen, and what's that process? Okay,
well, it was a long process. Right through my 20s and 30s, I experienced terrific fear and trepidation of what was happening to me, even though I felt I was putting pieces of the puzzle together. Because it wasn't a complete picture, your rational mind can go off on a tangent, and it can present all sorts of fears and concerns to you and lead you up blind alleys, and then you have to come back and re-examine things. So it was a real time of examination of what was happening. I had an experience one evening that I had virtual total recall of up to a point. And up until that point I'd had snippets of recall, I'd had quite large pieces of recall, but never quite total recall. And I distinctly recalled a conversation that took place between me and three greys. In the middle of the night, I found myself standing in the hallway of my home with my eldest son, and the three greys were conveying to us that they were going to be taking us somewhere. And instead of being in like what I call an altered state, where you're getting the information but you don't really feel like you're quite with it, I was absolutely with it. And so rather than just picking up the instruction from them, I was picking up everything else that they were thinking and privately conveying to each other. And I realised that they were not there to harm me, that they were taking me somewhere where something constructive and useful and positive was going to be occurring. And I actually heard the telepathic interaction between the three of them, because they do have the ability to exclude you from that. And I picked them up saying, "She is fully conscious. It is now time for her to remember more." And it was from that time on that I began to have much more extensive conscious memory of my contacts and what had taken place, where I'd gone, what the environment was like, and what we were working on. So that particular incident was a catalyst for me in that the fear dropped away. It did have times where it reared up and came back because I'm human and that's how we operate, you know, we keep re-examining.
Yes.
But overall that fear dropped away and it was a real turning point.
Right. And from then on it was, did you I know you said you had sort of stepped back a bit and sometimes you'd have the fear again, but did it sort of progressively go on to be positive?
Yes, it progressively went on till I had a greater understanding of what was taking place and why, and what I was part of and what I was doing. So it not only had an effect on how I viewed the contact situation that I was experiencing, but it had an effect on my whole life. What was important to me from that point on, what I wanted to do with my life and how I wanted to lead my life. So it had a much greater effect than just the experiences themselves.
So what exactly is the program?
Okay, it was not one program. If I can put it this way, the Greys are working as part of a larger group of extraterrestrials, from my understanding. And we often hear, you know, they're rogues and they work on their own and they've got a negative agenda, etc. And of course, people experience things differently, and there may be a variety of species of Greys. We don't know that. But certainly the species that I'm working with have this agreement with the spiritual hierarchy of our planet and other species that they're working with. And the agenda is to bring us up to speed because we represent a little bit of a threat, particularly with our interest in nuclear warfare and weaponry. Plus we're venturing out into space when we haven't solved the problems of our own planet. We have not raised our spirituality, our understanding of us being a total species and not just a whole group of nationalities. And so we do represent a bit of a threat, if I can put it that way. So my understanding is that programs were formulated to assist humanity to upgrade, raise up, become more spiritually aware, and to teach us things. And my understanding is that there's probably millions of humans worldwide involved in these programs, from scientists to even skeptics to every walk of life. People are involved in contact experiences, whether they have conscious memory of it or not, and that this is having a flow-on effect in our civilization and on our planet for a positive outcome. And
has this program been in place for a long time?
Yes, it's been in place, from my understanding, for the last 4 generations. Like my children are the 4th generation of my generation of family, and the familial aspect comes out very often, as you know, in contact research, where your mother or father or your son or daughter and yourself have experienced something, or your grandparents. And certainly this has been the case for me, where this education has been going on and there's been a purpose to it, and that the 4th generation, which is my children's generation, is the one that has had the most focus and the most education from these groups of extraterrestrials to bring about changes to the planet, to get themselves into positions of responsibility and power, if you might put it that way, but in a positive sense, where that power of responsibility will be used in a positive sense, to bring about changes to everything across the field on our planet in the future.
So, I mean, researchers, and your fellow researchers and myself included, you know, we get reports, like you said, of people saying that these contacts run through family lines, generational. But they often report too, with that, medical examinations, and they're taking genetic samples and all that. In your case, did that happen?
Yes, it did happen, but not in a negative sense, in the sense that genetic material was taken, and I have been shown children on board craft that have contained my genes. But yes, I think there's a whole raft of layers, and I describe it as a multi-layered, complex program. So, there are programs for certain purposes. So some people may have been involved in programs where a lot of genetic material has been taken, and they have memory of that, and their memories may be unpleasant. But then there are other areas where you're learning mind skills, or you're learning telepathy and other things, learning about our own planet and where we've gone wrong and what needs to change. And then there'll be scientists who are part of this program who are coming up with things that are changing our world. And I'm not saying that all of that is from an alien source. I'm saying that maybe their knowledge on some subconscious level has been enhanced and added to, which has assisted them in some way.
Well, given that extraterrestrials seem to be masters of mental ability, shall we say, and how they interact with people during their close encounters, and how they seem to be able to control their minds to help suppress the fear and all those sorts of things. Are we wise to actually trust that what they say or put into our minds is actually true?
Well, that's really up to the individual to decide. I know how I feel about it, but everyone has to make up their mind on that question according to their background, their belief systems, what they've experienced in their life. And that may change over time, it may not. But their efforts seem to be to make these positive changes to our civilization.
One particular regression experience that you talk about was it was revealed to you the extent of your childhood contact experiences then, and during which you learned to interpret alien scripts and how to use advanced technology. So can you still do this? I guess, have you found that the information that you were taught about advanced technology, does it apply to you now here on planet Earth? What do you do with it?
Well, that is an interesting question, because much of what we were taught to use on a craft involves consciousness-assisted technology. So you use you're keying into that technology, and it's as if your energy or your being, your consciousness, becomes a part of it. We don't have that kind of technology at present. We are moving in that direction quite clearly, but we don't have it yet. So no, I can't use that kind of technology in my day-to-day life because it doesn't yet exist.
Right.
But on a craft, for example, interpreting scripts, it appears to me, and listening to a number of experiencers worldwide who talk about reading scripts and writing scripts, and I've seen what people have produced. And on the craft I have seen two kinds of script used, and I have used one of them, not the other. So it seems that there is what I would call a bridging script, and there's a number of experiencers who've used that terminology, a bridging script, that has a similarity to some of our own symbols, written symbols, but at the same time it has a similarity to alien script,
right,
or symbols that's important to them. And so people can actually write and read that, interpret it, and I've seen people do that. But the script that I have used requires what I call depth reading, where you have a symbol, and that symbol may represent a vast amount of information, and to access that symbol you access it psychically, telepathically, through consciousness. And I can describe it as spiralling down a tunnel, and there's more tunnels leading off left and right that lead you to other related information, and in spiralling down this consciousness tunnel you are assimilating the data. That's the best way I can describe it. So it's not like you write something down and you can read it. It is a totally different...
To gathering the information.
And I call it as advanced knowledge acquisition, because you acquire it through consciousness rather than actually tangibly writing and reading it.
Right.
So I have seen, I talk about in my speeches, a situation where I was in a test situation on a craft where we were required to use these skills that they'd taught us to solve a problem, and the purpose of the test was not focused, the greys were not focusing on the outcome and getting the right answer. They wanted to focus on how you reached the answer and what skills you were able to exhibit that they've taught that you could use and manifest in order to get an answer. They weren't worried about the answer at all. They wanted to see you using those skills, and depth reading script was one of those skills.
So the program is to enhance humans, to enhance our souls, right, with a grey intelligence, right? And then we will go on and do whatever finish the program, basically.
No, the program is not to enhance our souls with a grey identity. That's just certain groups of people,
right,
who have a certain thing to do in life.
Yes.
But the rest of the programs are actually just to enhance and upgrade us in terms of the planet, the state of the planet, where we're going with our technology. How we view other life forms, including life forms on our own planet. And I've had conversations with Greys about pets, how their understanding of how we view a pet, and why do we view it that way? It's another life form. It's not there to have power over. It's another life form to be appreciated and understood. So that really keyed in with me because I'm a real animal lover. So the programs themselves are millions and millions of humans being educated in all kinds of ways that filters to the subconscious, and much of that will rise out at certain points in their life, and they'll utilise it. And we all go, oh, where did that thought come from? It's that kind of thing. We all experience innovation and creativity, and that's what they're tapping in on, is helping us to really advance that and bring out the best in us in terms of how we view our planet and how we can improve our planet. And there's grave concern, of course, about the state that our planet is in at present, and how it's got there, and how it can be turned around, or is it too late?
So what's their interest in it then? What's in it for them?
Well, I think that there's this oneness that we all talk about from time to time, and this oneness means that what we do to each other affects us all, sooner or later in some way or another. If we harm something else, it harms us at the same time. So in terms of our planet, we are not even a global community. We talk about a global village, but we're not a global village yet. We're still in the very infancy stages of coming to terms with that, with the different cultures, different races, different creeds, all of that kind of thing we're still coming to terms with and learning to live with. And we've been doing that for hundreds and hundreds of years. We haven't got there yet. And then if we were to become an interplanetary, following our space race stuff and getting out and sending out probes and looking at setting up a community on Mars, we're taking all of those constrictions in our life and all of those belief systems with us. And all of the other life forms out there are probably very concerned about that, because we do have warlike tendencies, and they're concerned about where that's going to lead us and how it's going to affect them. If we destroy our planet, we contribute to a change in our solar system. That contributes to a change in the area our solar system sits in our galaxy. So it's all a flow-on effect. And they've shown me in a group of humans, part of a group of humans, many times, this interaction. They constantly stress the energetic interaction between planets, between the solar system and other areas around us. This constant interaction going on and how it affects all.
Interesting though, because when we see images of space that we've gotten from the Hubble Space Telescope, for example, there's millions, billions, trillions of solar systems and galaxies.
That's right.
Why are they so concerned about this one?
Because we are developing nuclear technology, and because there's a whole raft of, from my understanding, of the same kind of things happening in other areas of our galaxy. And they described it to me as a river. you have a river that flows. The central flow is positive. It's moving, it's going somewhere, it has a purpose. But on either sides of the river, you've got the muddy eddies and the pools with the kind of slimy stuff on top where things are a little bit stagnant and things aren't moving. It's not moving in the flow, it's not with the general flow. And so what they're trying to do is bring us back into more of a general flow and a more positive energy, because let's face it, the overriding energy on our planet at present is probably not very positive.
So is there a timing for this agenda?
Well, they describe the timing to me as like a train journey, because often in order to explain something to you, one of their telepathic skills, which I call fishing, is that they go into your mind and they see what you know and they find a parallel or an analogy that you will understand. Then they draw it out and they make a picture that you understand. So on this occasion they described it as a train journey, where you are start at point A and your destination is point B. That's where you want to be. But the train journey may involve stops, it may involve people who get on and off the train, incidents that occur along the way, whether the train breaks down or whatever. So you've got this point B in mind where you want to be, but you've got all of these other things that have to be gone through and solved and passed through along the way. So it's rather like pulling a rubber band. You know, one day it might be here, the next day it might be back here, the next day it might be up here. So you're constantly progressing, hopefully, but you will have backward steps along the way.
Now, I was also intrigued by the idea that you were introduced to your as yet unborn son when you were a child. Was that on a craft?
Yes.
Was it? You was.
Yeah.
So, and he was shown to you as a ball of light. And this sort of thing, I've read about this in The Watchers with Betty Andreasen's case as well, where she saw balls of light bouncing around in the inside. And he was also introduced as a friend of yours. And then you then say that your relationship, or you were told, I don't know, that your relationship will continue with him even after your death, suggesting by the extraterrestrials' knowledge of an afterlife. Is that right?
Yes. I don't know that they necessarily see a before life and an afterlife. I think they have a much more holistic picture of a life continuum that has this component, and this component, but it is a continuum. And so what they were referring to was one day my life will end, but my soul will not. That will continue. That spark of knowledge and soul source will continue in the field of consciousness, and I will be able to assist him or communicate with him from that status, the same as we have mediums who speak to, spirits of the dead. It's the same concept, that life is still continuing. It's just taken on a different form.
So more like an existence.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now you're in Australia. You're speaking at various places here in Brisbane and Sydney, and your goal with your book here is to talk to the people who are having experiences, I think. Is that it as well? Or
yes, I think if I can put it this way, is on this trip at least, I want to speak to the converted, basically to people who already have an understanding of part of groups, etc., and who have some understanding of the subject. And I've called my speech Waking the Sleepers, because I think there's a lot of people who've got a piece of the puzzle here and a piece of the puzzle there, just as I have had for many years, and are trying to put it together and make some sense of it for their life. Now, I'm not saying that my book is the only agenda. I'm saying it's an agenda. It's a possible agenda that might relate to some other people as well. And so, if people gain some understanding and it helps them in where they are at in this point of time, then I'll be very happy about that.
So what's your suggestion, or your suggestion, I guess, or words of advice for people who are having close encounters, or may have just realised that they're having close encounters? Do you have, through your whole experience, which is, been trying and had the opposite thing going on as well, with the change of perspective and feelings, what do you suggest for people?
don't try to hurry it. There's a lot of people out there who have a sense that there's something they're supposed to do in their life and they don't know what it is. I hear people time and again contacting me. I'm so frustrated because I feel like I'm meant to be doing something, but I have no idea what it is. Can you help me? And my advice to them is just let it unfold. By all means, follow your interests, follow what gives you satisfaction in your life, but become interested in the world and what is happening, and speak out. Start to speak out about things. Find things that you're passionate about. Find things that have meaning to you and have meaning to all of us, and follow that. And your path will drop in front of you. You know, when you least expect it, it'll open up, because I talk in my book about thought seeds and information packages. And this is where the ETs will place in your mind something that will unfold in the future, because they can see right ahead of what's going to take place. And it's a constant chess game of how are we going to work this through with this person or whatever. So there's a lot of people out there who've had experiences, have a feeling that they are needing to do something, but are trying to make it happen. And that's where a lot of people fall down, because they go up a blind alley or they take a wrong turn. It's better just to let it unfold, and to understand that a lot of people who've been on craft and have been a part of these programs have had this package put in their mind to open up at a certain time. And I've experienced that a number of times throughout my life, where something's just, boom, it's opened up. There is the path ahead of me, there is the solution or whatever. And I'm not talking about giving a situation thought and coming to a possible solution. I'm talking about something quite profound that just drops there. And it's very real, and you know that that's it.
And that's what you need to do.
Yes. But you know, you also have to be a little circumspect and careful about who you speak to and where you go, because there's lots of different things out there, and it's become a minefield going onto YouTube or the internet. There's so much information there. What do we trust? And I can just say, follow your gut feeling or your instinct, and really try to examine, does that feel right for me? If it doesn't, find what does feel right for you.
And a lot of people, like, this experience is completely isolating, and I find that even today people are can be surprised that this is happening to other people too. It's getting less and less of that, but every now and then I get someone saying, what's going on, you know, help me understand this. And I say, well, you're not alone, and blah blah blah, this has all happened to other people, but they're still surprised.
That's right.
You know?
Yes, because sometimes people have a realisation or a memory of something, or something, a coincidence that occurs that triggers something, triggers a memory, or triggers something that now has a different value and importance to them. It just suddenly stands out in front of them, and they want to examine it. They want to understand it, but they don't know where to start. So, you know, there's groups that you can join right throughout Australia, as our group in New Zealand, and, you know, right throughout the world. But yes, it can be very confronting. It can be very challenging. As you said, it can be very isolating. And I remember the situation when I first heard someone speak about the same situation as me, and I write about it in my book. I heard a young man who was invited along to a UFO group in New Zealand to talk about what he believed was an abduction experience he'd had in Canada. And I was struggling at that time, not knowing who to turn to, where to go to find out more about what was happening to me. And it was the first time I'd heard someone describing what I had experienced. And it was as if everybody else in a room just disappeared, and it felt as if there was just him and I there, even though the room was full of people. It was such a profound feeling, hearing someone else describe what I had experienced. And that was another turning point for me, because it made me feel, oh, I'm sane after all. But it gives you a grounding. It gives you a foundation to start building on, is to know that you're not the only one.
Yes, because you feel like the rug's been pulled out from underneath
right.
you, don't you? And your world is upside down.
And you worry if you've got children, you worry about your husband, your family, You worry about your relationships and who you should share it with.
Yes, that's the other point, isn't it?
Because it can be devastating. It can break families up.
Yes, it does too. And I know that people have reported to me that they've told one person years ago, probably a family member or a very close friend who they trusted, who they had a negative response from, and they just shut up.
It's devastating.
Yes. So in your perfect, or in our perfect world, with what would you like to see in, say, the UFO community or in some other community that doesn't exist already that would be extremely helpful and beneficial for people who have close encounters?
Well, I would like to see a lot of the very vivid descriptions experiences give of technology and modes of telepathy, etc. I would like to see that examined by people in those related fields of science. And when I was writing my book, I presented my material to Dr. Rudy Schild in the USA. He's a Harvard emeritus astrophysicist. And I was very afraid to do that, but I felt absolutely compelled to do it. There was just no way out of it. It was something I had to do. And I waited in fear and trepidation for an email response from him, and found that he had gone through the chapter I sent him, and he had noted things that he understood that made sense in physics and science immediately. And he asked me for more chapters, so I sent more. And he was able to say, well, I believe this is this, or this is this, or this is explained by such and such, not being a scientist myself. And that gave me a great deal of confidence, because it now took on a new sense. What I had been talking about at conferences, stumbling along, not understanding the scientific side of it, explaining something that I couldn't explain it in scientific terms, he was a person who was able to put it into a framework that was new for me. And it was very invigorating, and it was very it gave me more confidence and in expressing my material. And I see now there's technology coming out in our own world, information technology and iPads and all kinds of things that are out now that I was describing 20-25 years ago. That I was using technology like that on a craft, where it was touch screen, you used your mind to operate it in some respects, you flipped pages with your finger, it had icons which you could touch and it would expand it out further. So once I realised that I'd actually been describing advanced versions of what has only just come out in our own technology. Now, in those days when I was describing those things, I didn't have a computer. Computers were only in large institutions in New Zealand. They were not available to the public. I'd never used one. And yet I was able to describe in detail what we now use as iPads and tablets and iPhone. That kind of technology. So once again, it was a process of discovery over last 10 years or so. You see something come out in the news. When I first saw the tablets and iPads coming out, it was like, there it is. It's a less advanced form, but there it is.
So you'd like to see more scientists involved?
More scientists involved, but also the other thing I would like to see is the experiencers be given more of a platform. I think that in UFO research and in conferences worldwide, it's often the researchers who get the platform, and they are simply presenting our material. And I know from my experiences on craft that people like myself have been taught how to encapsulate material and how to convey it in an energetic sense. So it was explained to me by what I call a senior grey on one occasion, where he said, in the future, people like yourself, and there's millions worldwide, will say, for example, a sentence, I can run. And when they say the word I, there might be people listening that will open something up for them. And I think, where did that come from? Oh, yes. the word can might open something up for someone else, or the word run might open something. So we're talking about boxes and information capsules that are in people's minds, and as I said, my speech is called Waking the Sleepers. And hopefully this effect will happen worldwide, and therefore we have to have more experiencers talking, not allowing others to present their material, but saying it themselves, even if it's only a small amount of material that's relevant and that has interesting factors about it. It's up to us now to have the courage and to be more forthright about our experiences and to own them, because for a very long time we've been prevented from owning them by fear, by fear of the effect it'll have and what people will say about us, how we will be viewed, but also because the field has been dominated by researchers. Now that's part of the plan. They have done some wonderful work introducing these kinds of topics to the public in a semi-removed fashion, so it's not so confronting perhaps when you initially hear a researcher speak about it. But I think we've moved past that time now where people want to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Yes, yeah, and that's what we're doing here, is giving you a platform, hopefully. Yeah, so thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that. I know that people who watch this will pick up things from you as well. Now, if they want to contact you, how do they do that?
Well, I have a website, www.communicatorlink, all one word, .com. But they can also go to our Ufocus NZ website. If they Google Ufocus NZ, they'll find our sighting website, and there's an email address there as well that they can contact me by.
Okay. And how do they buy your book?
On the Communicator Link website, they can purchase the hard copy there from me, or they can, if they've got a Kindle, they can go to Amazon and purchase an Amazon Kindle ebook.
Right, great. Okay, terrific. So get along and do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheryl.
And thank you.